This is Clover. Clover likes sports, fluffy boys, and trees. Clover is rowdy, unfocused, but overall still a nice person. This is December holiday. December likes sports, fluffy boys, and is closely tied to trees. December is rowdy, unfocused, but overall a nice person. This is Kris Dreamer, and they have absolutely nothing to do with any of what I just said. Nothing. Hello. This is a video about, and more specifically, a video about the nature of the Darkworlds and their relationship to their respective creators. Now gaze upon this. I was, for no reason at all, trying to compile all the Dessknight evidence into a definitive list. Halfway through this process, however, I realized a lot of the Dessknight proof hinges on the central point on the board here, which will be the topic of this here video. This video is in a sense a Dessknight proof video, though not exactly. By that I mean that I'm not going to go over all the general proof in detail or anything, since we all know them by now, hopefully. But this theory does require Des to be the knight, because otherwise it would not really make any sense at all. On the surface, a lot of this video will have nothing to do with the knight directly or even Des, but by the end, hopefully, you'll agree that the similarities between the seemingly unrelated stuff help to strengthen the case for Dessknight, as well as maybe help us solve some other mysteries in the game. If you are somehow out of the loop on why most, including me, assume Des is the knight, I'll leave some videos going over that theory more in depth, but to quickly cover all my bases, here's a 15-second recap. Number 1. Antlers, they both have antlers. Number 2. They both share star-related theming. Number 3. That has multiple times been related to baseballs. Number 4. The knight has many parallels to Undertale's Asriel. Number 5. Kris seems to know who the knight is. And number 6. Just everything about Raise Up Your Bat. To make this video at all cohesive, we'll first go over all the main facts and points of interest, roughly, chapter by chapter, though we will be hopping back and forth a little bit. Then, towards the end, I'll actually try to make a point and theorize what this could mean for the future. But anyway... Clover's a Darkener who has 3 heads, and her shtick is that each head has a different personality. The first head is loud and abrasive, or you could say, rowdy. The second one is nice and kind of happy-go-lucky. The last one is shy and or smart. Her room also contains stuff relating to her likes, but also, interestingly, is one of the only instances of actual in-universe music coming from the boombox in the room. You, as the sharp little cookie you are, probably already know where I'm going with this and the intro and like everything I've said already. Everything that Clover likes and all her personality traits are almost all exactly the same things we know of December holiday, based on her room. And while we don't really know how Des would rank trees on her interests tier list, she's still very closely tied to pine trees because they are usually Christmas trees. Also, based on her room, she was seemingly a messy and unfocused person. Like, just look at her room. We'll get back to Des's personality and how it relates to Clover in the Chapter 2 section, since that's where we get a lot more information about December. But the last point relating to this, we'll be talking about Clover's interest of cute and fluffy boys. Okay, yeah, whether the relationship between Assi and Des ends up being romantic or platonic doesn't really matter for this video, and I don't really care. I'm not that much of a shipping fanatic in the fandom. So I might miss some stuff here, but Des and Assi's relationship is an important topic for this video. So I'll go over most of the things here that I could think of linking Asriel and Des together, and things that give us an insight as to the nature of their relationship. First off, Des has a lot of Assi's stuff in her room. Both his sweater and retainer are there. Des also wore Assi's clothes, at least on one occasion, but considering the sweater in her closet, I'd assume this was a more regular occurrence. Then, there's the sealed ska CD. We know Assi likes ska music, and ska as a genre sucks ass, and I don't think Des really gives off a ska fan vibe, so I'm left to assume that the CD is either a gift for or to Assi. There's also the drawing of a dragon, This might not be a direct link to Asriel, but it is a running theme with both characters for some reason. Last thing, that could be me just looking into this too far, but both Asriel and December have the exact same star decorations in their rooms. The ones in Asriel's room at least seem to be put there by himself, considering how Kris doesn't have any on their side. It seems that there is at least a surface level counterpart of December in the Darkworld in the form of Clover, in an alternate world that is somewhat disconnected from the main true reality of the world. Do you know what this reminds me of?
Persona 4 is a JRPG developed by Atlus and released in 2008. The main plot point of Persona 4,
spoilers for Persona 4,
is that there is an alternate world called the TV world, which, if one were to enter, they would share a section of that world to correspond to them and their deepest darkest secrets, as well as creating a shadow version of themselves that on a surface level represents a part of oneself. I promise we'll get to Kris soon, I promise, please don't leave, please.
So yeah, in short, the point here is that Clover and her room are almost literally just what Dungeons and Shadows are in Persona 4, without the deep dark secret stuff. I think that the creator of the Dark World, just like in Persona 4, has an effect on the Dark World they create, willingly or not. So, going forward, we'll be focusing more on the Dark Worlds themselves and what links they have to their respective creators, since Clover is the only character so far that is this direct in their links to their creator. The cyberworld, maybe because of Queen herself, seems to place an importance on Noelle over the other Lightners in both routes. Since in both routes, Noelle is the central character to the story, whom the entire plot revolves around. Also, Noelle is the only Lightner to have a special room at the top of the mansion. Being Dess's sister, it would make sense for her to have an elevated level of importance in a world created by Dess. Dess herself manifests in the cyberworld mainly in the form of baseballs, like in Clover's room. I'd like to argue that the baseball imagery in this world is indeed related to Dess, because where the hell else would it be coming from in the cyber world? Is Jockington so important to the library's computer lab that he just has to affect it more than anyone else? I really don't think so. We also quite literally just spell out December in the Dark World, where Noelle makes an interesting comment about the cyber world, that the cyber world is apparently just like a place where Dess would have wanted to take Noelle into the light world. We've now rattled off some points about Dess and the Cyber City and stuff like that for a bit too long, so unfortunately, we are now going back to Clover again. We still have 2 of the 3 known personality traits of Clover's left to link back to Dess. Her shyness and her kindness. The shyness part is harder, since there is no direct mention of Dess being shy, or hell, that many direct mentions of Dess in general. But I think that in and of itself could be evidence for her being shy, since no one knew her, so no one talks about her. But at least from what we've heard from Noelle in regards to Dess, she does seem to genuinely be a nice person, at least to the people closest to her. In the December puzzle, in chapter 2, Noelle talks about how Dess wanted to take her somewhere just like this, and reminisces of the times they would all hang out together, and Dess would comfort her. To add to this, in the 2024 holiday newsletter, if you scroll down to the very bottom of the page, there's a little snowman with antlers on it. Clicking on it takes you to a page with the following text.
When it snows, me and my sister and everyone have a contest to make the biggest snow angel of all. We lie on the ground and spread out our arms and wave them until we get a shape just like us. I'm the smallest, even smaller than Kris, but I don't lose. Because after we stand up to look, Dess always tells me, "Hey look, Ellie, yours has more hidden underneath," and pushes away all the snow that I couldn't reach. So I had the biggest wings of all. I wish it could snow whenever I wanted.
Okay, enough of that. Back to the cyberworld. There's more I can back up the very controversial claim that Dessknight opened this fountain. A counter-argument I've seen is that why doesn't Dess have a room in the mansion then, if she opened the fountain? Why doesn't the person opening the fountain have their experiences with the internet reflected in the dark world? Well, I think the reason for that is that the dark worlds still need something to relate back to in the light world. So, for example, if there was no search history for December holiday, there wouldn't be anything based off of said search history, even if she was the person opening the fountain. And the reason for why there wouldn't be any search history for Des? I mean, she's been missing for God knows how long. That PC's been wiped at least once. Another point that this here tweet brought into my attention, beyond just being something Des wanted to visit and bring at least Noelle to, the Cyber City has a lot of different cliché date-themed areas, pretty much for the entirety of its run. It also, contains most of the weird route. Now, this obviously isn't a slam dunk case for Dessknight, but of all the Knight candidates, I feel like this type of imagery would fit Des the best, if she had a thing for Asriel. Her memories of the library of his computer lab being tied to anything but studying would fit her more than like Asriel, and I don't think Carol would have such cliché date imagery in her world. Wait, this is just me talking about Desriel again. Why is everything Desriel? Everything is Desriel, everything. Next up, Chapter 3, and here we are mainly going to focus on Kris, and then later on link it back to what it means for Dessknight. I apologize in advance to the two people whom I've seen talking about this topic, because this analysis of Kris and the TV world will most likely be a bit subpar, since this is the first time I've ever done anything like this at all, and this is where it really does get really complicated. The TV world, no question, is 100% opened by Kris. If we disagree on this, the TV world does revolve around Kris and their family and their relationship to the holidays. Obviously both being very central to Kris. The fact that Tenna is the centerpiece of the dark world is interesting, considering how no one in the light world has seemingly given a shit about him in years. Which could mean that he was/is important to the fountain's creator, Kris, since they kind of do seem to miss the old times, at least a little bit. Actually, almost everyone in the TV world is just harkening back to the good old days. Ram talks about it, Tenna is basically traumatized by not being as popular as he used to, and most obviously, the egg room. But I'll get to the egg rooms later since they're, weird. There's also a lot of stuff that only seems to matter to Kris, and maybe Asriel, like the Mantle or Legend of Tenna games, the egg room, Ram, Pippins, the parental lock system. But he ain't home no more. One thing I very purposely, and not because I forgot, left out of the Des and Asriel connection list earlier was this Rybik dialogue. A lost and lost and lost girl. A crying and crying and crying boy. Actually, just all the Rybik dialogue. Just throw them all in here. I think they're all just related to Des and Asriel. We know that Des was rowdy, messy, unfocused, and is literally now a lost girl. Aside from the crying boy, the connections to Asriel are a bit weaker than they are to Des. The smelly description could just be the stupid fucking pizza flavored deodorant, but considering how there wouldn't really be any other boys in the Dreamer household that the Rybiks could even be referring to, I'm just gonna go with the boy here is Asriel. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because these are once again things that Kris, in some form, has experienced within the Dreamer household. So it's not surprising that these darkeners now bring them up here. Why do they specifically get attached to dust-based darkeners? I refuse to comment. Now, to take a break from just pointing at things and telling you to look at them, a lot of the Dark World seems to focus on one singular lightener. This time, their fountain's creator, and with very, very personal themes. Now we are at least grazing the actual point of the video here. That being that the fountain opener's experiences in the space where the Dark World is being created affects the darkness and the Dark World itself as it's being created. So yes, even after chapters 3 and 4, I'm still going with the take that the Dark Worlds go off of last Thursdayism logic. Though not exactly. The experiences of all the darkness and the history of the Dark Worlds are real. They did indeed happen and just weren't made up. But the darkness themselves didn't experience them directly. The memories and the history of the darkness are molded by the memories and experiences of the creator of the fountain, as it's being created. In this sense, it's like creating a story, which is something that the Deltarune fandom has kind of latched onto for a while now, that creating a dark fountain is akin to creating a story. And to create a story, you need to have experiences. The stories you create are, in a sense, a reflection of you. Even though it would directly conflict the darkness are always alive theory that I've seen making the rounds somewhat frequently. In short, the will of the person who makes the dark fountain affects the dark world directly, whether on purpose or not. This is what I was referring to with the Persona 4 connection earlier. You yourself affect the worlds you create. Before we move on from this, I do feel I need to clarify, I don't think the Darkworlds are playing pretend. I do believe they actually literally exist within the dark fountains, just like the Persona 4 TV world exists within the TVs. While the fountain is active, the darkness are alive and can have their own experiences not linked to the lightness at all. The all in the hood theories are stupid, annoying, and very boring. But now actually moving on, looking at the Dreamer family, it does feel like everyone else has on some level moved on from the incident, at least better than Kris. A sense of guilt just emanates from Kris and seems to be the driving force behind their actions throughout the story. And that feeling of guilt feels like it surfaces in some of the darkness, whom seem to vaguely echo Kris's own feelings and stuff they did and or witnessed before chapter 1. Take this Pippin for example, that just tells Kris, "It's important to push your loved ones away at times," which very much feels like what Kris has done with the people around them, especially with Noelle. Furthermore, oh no, oh fuck, you're really going off of the deep end here, oh fuck, oh no. Okay, so ERAM. They definitely aren't your average run-of-the-mill darkener, since they seem to have extensive knowledge of Kris's plans, they know about the shadow crystals, they know about the mantle being important, and they know about the weird road. All of this being very closely tied to Kris, once again. To add to this, ERAM seems to know a lot about some specific aspects of Kris, seemingly some violent tendencies they exhibit or exhibited, which ERAM talks about after the battle. ERAM just feels like a very deep cut of Kris's psyche, a side Kris would want to suppress, and a side they feel guilty about. So, I feel like, just like how Clover was partially an imprint of Des's personality, that ERAM is a part of Kris. This could be why Kris doesn't want us to enter the mantle shelter, since they might have already got on to the fact that this darkness seems to know a bit more than your average Pippin. So there is a possibility that Kris knows that ERAM knows about the mantle itself. An alternate explanation could be that Kris just doesn't want us poking around the shelter, since it's the roaring group chat HQ. And because something bad might have happened there. Also, the fact that ERAM knows about how Kris was feeling just yesterday, which is something they couldn't know if the memory of it didn't come from Kris. Points to the fact that it's Kris's current day self who affected ERAM's thoughts and just general knowledge. Assuming ERAM isn't just a friend in disguise. But this then brings up the question of, what is ERAM? Are they just an object in the light world? It very much depends on whether ERAM decides to show up in a future Dark World friend style. However, I do think there is a pretty decent answer as to what ERAM is, and I don't think they are a friend level entity. A pretty popular take that I've seen is that ERAM is Kris's red horn headband that they wore when they were young. But to me, I think the most possible answer to this question is that ERAM is just the mantle game itself. The game freaks the fuck out every time we beat the shit out of ERAM, and all the consoles turn off after we fight, and we are being violent in the game, which could tie back to the Kris's violent tendencies thing. Maybe video games were a way to relieve these tendencies and not act out. This, however, brings up a problem. If ERAM is some sort of meaningful object to Kris in the light world, why is Des's personality imprinted onto a fucking jack-of-clubs card of all things? Did Des really love clubs that much as to mold it in her image? The only proper answer to this I can conjure is that it's because it's the club's suit, like a sports club. Now, Before we move on to chapter 4, we also need to talk about the... I have a few feelings about what the egg rooms are and what they represent and who the Forgotten Man is, so I'm gonna give a quick summary on one of them. My thoughts on this are very similar to this video by Seek Stuff, and while I'm not 100% sold on Friend Mike, it's still a great video and I very much recommend watching it. However, my thoughts on the Forgotten Man do differ enough from Seek's video, so it still gets its own short section here, because we do need to talk about the egg rooms in relation to Kris. The chapter 3 and 4 egg rooms have themes of lying closely tied to them. The Sapper that lets us into nowhere talks about Kris being a cheater, the flying aces were made by Kris to cheat at cards, the Philosopher in chapter 4 that lets us into the second chance egg room just straight up calls us a liar. The chapter 4 egg room heavily focuses on some sort of trauma that Kris has endured, and again, Kris, more than anyone, seems to be racked with guilt. And I don't really think there is another event we are aware of that would warrant such levels of guilt other than if Kris, in some way, either caused or witnessed Des's disappearance and didn't tell anyone, or lied about it. I feel like Forgotten Man is, in some way, the representation of what in Kris's mind happened to Des. It's their trauma personified behind a tree, who can only speak in the land of Kris's own lies. He is the Forgotten Man who has been forgotten many times, because Kris wants to, and tries to, forget, but no matter how many times they try, they will be remembered again. I do recognize the contradiction here, however. The fact that even though the egg rooms are so centered on Kris's past, they appear in fountains made by the Knight and Susie. So how can that be? So, I have another video in the works on what the egg rooms are, which would clear up this problem. However, that video, right now, is at least half an hour long, so we are skipping that. I promise it's good though. The gist of it is that the egg rooms aren't real, and don't get made like the rest of the Darkworlds, and are just a device trick. Okay? Okay. Now, we can move on to... Okay. Chapter 4 is a bit easier to pick through since there's only really a few tiny things to go over, so I'll point them all out in quick succession and then make my points based on them, since there's only really like one, maybe two, and it continues off of my earlier claim that being the whole you need to have experiences to make a story we went over in the chapter 3 section. First thing probably everyone noticed is that the second sanctuary is all kinds of fucked up. It focuses heavily on the girl, and Kirsten is absent, only vaguely present in the form of the Sound of Justice. Second, all three Darkworlds largely lack any NPCs, only really having Gerson and Jackenstein, and then maybe you could count Captains, Wafers and Organics. Chapter 4 also lacks a main antagonist. And finally, the third and first sanctuaries heavily include music in different forms. Now to the point here. The locations of the Dark Fountains in chapter 1 to 3 are all places that the fountain openers, presumably, spent a lot of their time in. Yes, being a student in the unused classroom, who probably spent time in the library, studying, with Asriel. And Kris, of course, lives at the Dreamer home. But the church? Does the Susie or Des seem like the kinds of people to actively attend mass every week? We know at least Susie hasn't been there, based on Noelle's reaction to seeing her there, but Des at some point in the past has been in the church, attending youth service with Noelle. But this feels like it was a very long time ago, so she might not really have any memories formed of the place. The fact that the sanctuary is so heavily focused on music and the prophecy could be because that's all Des remembers of the church. She doesn't have anything else to go off of other than those two very basic ideas. This is the reason I believe the sanctuaries lack a wide cast of characters and a main antagonist, since neither of the fountain creators have had any experiences in the church that would affect the Dark World, or at least any meaningful memories. This would also explain why Gerson doesn't show up properly in the second sanctuary. Ralsei says that darkness patterned after the memory of a loved one tend to only appear in a very specific kind of darkness, very much in support of my supposition here, that you need to have memories, in this case, of a loved one to bring them back to life in your darkness, your story, which Susie doesn't have, since Gerson died before he could teach Susie. I feel like this line of reasoning could also answer why Susie's dark world is so different from everyone else's. She simply has no experience in creating dark worlds, or anything else for that matter. So her stories lack the refinement of the others. This could also be why the prophecy is out of order in the second sanctuary. Presumably, the knight does know the prophecy, so the prophecy panels that show up in the first and third sanctuaries would be in order. Subsequently, Susie doesn't know the prophecy. She knows what the prophecy is, but not the whole thing in detail, so all the panels would be thrown into random order. Another reason could be that, and I think this is more likely, Susie's reason for opening a fountain is very different from Kris and the knight. Kris's and the knight's reason for opening the fountain seem to be aligned with the plan. They seem to be working together and would have the same reason to open the fountains. But Susie's reason to open the fountain is to just ask Gerson what the code to the door is. So in this sense, her will, the thing she's concentrating on when she's opening the dark fountain, is very different from Kris and the knight.
The one thing here that I feel like has the possibility of breaking this whole thing apart
is the fact that the prophecy appears at all in the Darkworlds. Because they don't really have any light world counterparts to them, the prophecy in the Dark World feels like it knows a lot more than what the Lightners have. So what is the prophecy based on then, if the Light World doesn't have the prophecy fully? My only real counter argument to this is that it could just be some Gaster bullshit, since it is composed of the Depths image, which is tied to the device, and some other stuff that I am not going to go over here. But yeah, this is probably the biggest weak point to this theory, in my opinion at least. But now, I think that is almost everything in relation to this theory, so now we can move on to the last chapter of this video. Okay, I said almost everything, so here's two things that I couldn't really figure out where to put them, so I'll go over them really quickly here. First off, I think Lancer is supposed to be Kris from the point of view of the fountain's creator, like Clover is to Des. I didn't mention this in the chapter 1 section since I was spouting so much nonsense there already, that adding this would have made the whole thing even worse than it already is. But hear me out. At the same time of Des's disappearance, Kris would have been much younger. I feel like just around the age that Lancer is supposed to be. Lancer is a weird-ass little kid getting lost in the forest and is very suspiciously often called names relating to Christmas. The second thing I couldn't fit anywhere, I feel like this could also explain why Sham has such an important role in the story, considering how they collect Alafar's shadow crystals, which seem to be important. There are some hints towards Sham being a doll that either Des and or Assi made, since they show up in the wallpaper of Asriel's computer, and Des has buttons and sewing equipment in her room. If Sham is one or both of their dolls, it would make sense if that doll then had a personality that stands out amongst the rest of the darkness and played an important role in the story created by one of the owners of the doll. Okay, now that's actually everything, so we can now move on to trying to theorize what this could mean for the future and try to answer some other questions that could be dependent on this theory. For this video, I have 3 questions that I think could be answered through using the logistics of this video's hypothesis. I'm not going to go super deep into this because these are topics that have already been discussed at length in relation to other things, and they are, like, in general just very popular talking points. But I still feel like it's worth at least diving surface level into these. So, the Clover equals Des and ERAM equals Kris connection still, in my opinion, very much holds water. But the most obvious case of this is Ralsei being a reflection of Asriel. This is something that probably even the biggest glue eaters who've played both Undertale and Deltarune pick up on, because it is so intentionally obvious that that connection is being made here. But how? How does a surface level reflection of Asriel end up in the Grand Fountain? Based on the last... Holy shit, it's been like half an hour already. Oh my god. 30 minutes? I can really come up with 2 solutions to this puzzling puzzle. Number 1. Asriel made the Grand Fountain and then immediately fucked off the college. My issue with this is the fact that, in this case, the Grand Fountain would have been open for a long time, at least like 2 months in game. Because that's the last time Asriel was in hometown. About there, it's really hard to like actually pinpoint the timeline of Deltarune, but it's not been a year at least. In this time, no one has entered the supply closet. No one. Also, why would Asriel know how to open a dark fountain? Number 2, and I think this is more likely, that someone very close to Asriel opened the Dark Fountain, and for whatever reason, their impression of Asriel was imprinted onto something, making it into Ralsei. The candidate list for this is longer, obviously, since it's not just Asriel, but not by much. I really only think that Kris, Noelle, and Des would fit this description, out of which I'd place my bets on either Kris or Des. The what the hell even is Ralsei could be a video on its own, which I might do, but not here, because this video will end up being 2 hours long, and I'm already dreading the editing of this video without it. But in short, I feel like I've heard this in a video a long time ago, so I can't really claim that this is my theory. But Ralsei is in a sense the heart of hometown, because that's how Asriel is kind of described, and that's why Ralsei can go everywhere in the Dark World. Not a solid theory, but out of all the Ralsei theories, I think that's my personal favorite. Going off of my theory, I feel like we can narrow down the Knight candidate list a lot. The Knight would have to have, number 1, memories and experiences tied to the unused classroom, Library B, but lack them in the church. Number 2, have close ties to Des and Noelle, such that they would either be a part of the world or be very important to the Dark World. Number 3, known Gerson Boom. And number 4, some element of their personality or memories show up in the Darkworlds. Of course, I personally think that the Knight is Des, so my bias may be showing here, but I don't think there really is any other candidate that fits all of these criteria other than Des. The reason I feel like Carol, for example, gets crossed out is because she would have almost no memories of the unused classroom, at least in its current state. Asriel would get crossed out because he would have memories of the church, since he actively attended it. And Kris isn't even a question, shut up. As for Chapter 5, I am kind of scared, considering how heavily the TV world focuses on Kris and how centered on Kris's trauma it was. How bad will the fucking Flower King be if Asgore opens it? Like, seriously, those flowers are going to be so fucked up. Asgore probably has so many awful memories tied to those, like at least one of them is just gonna spend the entire chapter crying or something. Kris will probably end up being even more miserable here than in the TV world, I swear to God. Oh fuck. It's a starry pine tree, literally named Pine Tree Star, which kind of ties back to Des, since Des has some starry matter related to her. And the tree has the same color palette as the trees in Chapter 1. Fuck. Okay, so this would imply that the Knight opens a Dark Fountain in Chapter 5. But where? Does the Knight make the Flower King Dark World? In that case, by my hypothesis, there would be almost nothing there. Since Des disappeared before the Flower King was a thing, she wouldn't have any memories relating to it. If the Dark World isn't in the Flower King, the only other option for a Dark World really is the festival, which could have its own interesting implications. It would probably have something to do with Kris and Noelle, since they've got memories of the festival that tie into the current ongoing story of the game. And we know they will play some important part in the festival section of Chapter 5, because of the Chapter 4 Weird Route ending. Des would presumably have memories of the festival, so that Dark World wouldn't be completely empty, and could still have something to do with Kris and Noelle, since again, I'm assuming here, but Des probably was at the festival with them. It wouldn't really break the theory at all, and Asgore could still play a major role in the story, like it's been implied. So, going off of my hypothesis, it would start off at the Dreamer home, where we do some stupid bullshit and maybe kill Sans, and then we head out. At some point they would end up in the Flower King, and one way or another, Asgore opens up the Dark World, and then we have our funny adventure again. After this, I feel like we would head to the festival for real. Somewhere around here, the Knight starts the roaring. Because I feel like the only logical escalation of the story at this point would be to start the roaring. Because we've already fought a Titan, we fought the Knight. I feel like the next step here is to just start the roaring. And that's how we end up in the Dark World that is opened by Des, aka the Knight. So that's the theory, folks. I feel like it's a pretty solid take. This isn't like fully my own personal theory or anything. A lot of the topics in this video have already been largely discussed around the internet in different corners, but it's usually very fractured and not really related to anything else. So I hope this video functions as kind of like a compilation of all the different things amalgamated in one argument. I was thinking of actually ending the video with like a meta-narrative analysis of what this could mean for the game theming wise. But I feel like that aspect of this whole shit show of a video has already been discussed pretty well by a lot of other people who do it a lot better than I could ever do. So I won't really embarrass myself here with my media analysis degree I got from 2017 Undertale YouTube. Finally, to summarize this whole video before ending it, in my opinion, the Darkworlds and the characters within are a representation of the creator's experiences and memories tied to those places and objects, akin to creating stories. And without those experiences and memories, your Dark World will suck ass. Hi? If someone's still there, thanks for watching. Oh boy, I really think I should have picked an easier topic to talk about for my first ever video. I've never made a proper scripted video before, and I've just been editing stupid shitposts for like 10 years, so I hope the difference in quality between the script and the visuals wasn't too jarring. And hopefully this video wasn't too much of a mess, and I actually got my point across there in somewhere. Also, do I engagement bait here? Is this theory a certified Tony who thought of that moment? Or just pure ass? Let me know! Or don't. There's no audience anyway. Also, isn't it crazy? Even though we went over the egg rooms and the Forgotten Man, not once did I mention Gaster!